started.
Okay, how about that intro? All right, thanks so much for the invitation to present to the Women in Creative Photography. I love the name of your group because it implies that you guys do creative photography, and that's something that I'm all about, as many of you probably already know. This presentation I've titled Is AI the Holy Grail of Photo Processing? And yes, the photograph here in the title slide of the Holy Grail was created by AI. I used Midjourney to create that photo that you see there. So, as the slide says, I'm Larry Vogel. I'd like to thank Judy McLean for inviting me to do this presentation. Some of the clubs are a little resistant to the whole AI process, and I think we're slowly gaining some ground here with a little bit of acceptance of what is going to be allowed to be done to your photographs when you enter into club competitions and San Diego Fair and things like that. So, without any further ado, let's jump in here. I have some slides to go through here. All right, so I asked the question, are we ever really satisfied with the image just as it comes out of the camera? And of course the answer is no, not really. This is a sand dune image, one of mine that I did during the Pismo Beach workshop that I do every year. So you'll see the original there in color, not a lot of processing done to it, and the final image there. Are we happy with the straight camera image? This is a straight version of the Ansel Adams Moonrise image. And I say, no, not even the great Ansel Adams. He also did a lot of work to get the image from what came out of the camera to what we actually see in the photograph, the thing that is mounted and framed and hung in the exhibition. We have always been manipulating the original camera image. This is a late exposure after sunset, straight out of the camera, and there's the final version. More color, more contrast, lighter, darker, remove this object or that object. We're always working on the image to do more, to enhance it, and to make it more beautiful or make the composition better by removing elements. Photoshop definitely gave us those tools when we started working digitally to be able to correct our images in a way that we never thought was possible. So I've always said photography is a technical medium, and technology will always be changing. Therefore, the way we alter our images will always be changing. So yes, new technology comes along and we find better ways to accomplish the things that we need to do or want to do. And as a matter of fact, the things that we're doing some time back, we may have even thought that these things were never even possible. Especially if you've already started working with AI, it is just a wow moment for me, for everybody. In fact, Adobe even bragged about it and said, the way we create will never be the same. And I say amen to that, because I am just blown away by what can be done with this new technology. And we're only just stepped over the threshold of this new technology. We will continue to see more and more and more improvements made to this technology, and the way that we create will never be the same. My opinion is artists should never have restrictions placed on their techniques or on their creativity. Limitations that tell you what you can and can't do to your photographs. They're your photographs. You decide what you want to do. You make your image the best you know how, and move forward from there, that you have an image to be proud of to show in the end. And your creativity is what matters in the end, not what tools you use to create the image. So remember, AI is not about replacing photography. It's all about how we augment our photographs, right? These are tools that we use to improve our photographs. We augment what we did in camera, and we're going to also use these tools to augment how we edit our image and how we present our final image to the public to see. So let's jump into Photoshop and check out some of those great AI tools and functions. And remember, every tool has some limitations, and we're going to go over some of those as we get into the weeds, as they say, working with these tools inside Photoshop. So let's take a look. Okay, here we are inside Photoshop, and we're going to demonstrate some of the new AI functions here and tools. This is an image that I photographed at Point Lobos at the Whalers Cove, and a little bit of a backstory here that I created. Obviously, I've added the Hollywood sign there. So the park ranger shows up the morning for work, and he notices some fool has installed a Hollywood sign across the cove there. He grabs his binoculars and runs out to take a look and see what's going on. Of course, he's going to be asked to take that sign down. It's going to be a lot of work, but we're going to show him how to do it real easily using AI, artificial intelligence, and get the job done quickly. So there's a couple of things that we need to know before we even start using the tools. And what I have done here is, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in just a little bit, is I've created a duplicate layer, and on that duplicate layer I have already done a little bit of pre-sharpening and also did a little bit of noise removal. You'll see I've named my layer here minus noise plus sharp. And let me go ahead and go in a little bit further right there. If I turn that layer off, the background layer didn't have anything done to it. So you can see the noise here, like in his pants, and this background area here isn't quite as sharp. So part of the noise wear also adds a little bit of sharpening to the image also. I think I probably could sharpen it a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and go under Filter, Sharpen. I'm going to use Unsharp Mask here. Now I could use the topaz filters and do that too, but I'm just going to do it kind of here quickly and easily. Yeah, I think I'll just use this amount, radius at 0.7 and amount at 129, and say okay. All right, so now this layer has had the noise removed and a little bit of sharpening added to it. Now, one of the reasons why I've done that is to note that if we're going to make changes to the image using artificial intelligence, the thing I've noticed is that AI does not have the ability to recognize or replicate the noise in an image. And I've done it before where I've used AI to fill in areas, and the area that it fills in, you will not see the noise in the new area that AI has created. So in my workflow, I always do a little bit of sharpening up front and always do the noise removal so that I'm not having to worry about later on trying to make it function properly by removing the noise when I've already added some AI things in there. So believe me, good idea to remove the noise first before you actually start doing the retouching. Now, one of the things we're going to do is, like I said, we'll remove the Hollywood sign, but even before we do that, let's start with some very kind of simple retouching things. And what I want to do is I want to remove this wire that runs through the foreground here, and this post on the left hand side. And again, lots of tools that already exist in Photoshop that we can use. And so my toolbar is located over here. I could start with the spot healing brush, and I could take the spot healing brush and remove this object over here on the right hand side. In fact, I'll just go all the way down and just remove that and let go, and without making a selection, it has already removed it. Now, one of the things to note is that when you use the spot healing brush or any of the other functions inside of Photoshop's retouching tools here, that it will be obligated to using pixels from your image. So you're going to start to see some repeats where it's repeated this little bud here, it repeated it over here. Some of these diagonal lines have repeated on the edge over here. It grabbed a little bit of the wire and also repeated that there. Again, you could go back over those areas separately, but just know that that's one of the chief differences, is that the retouching tools, the existing retouching tools in Photoshop, all of those are obligated to using the pixels from your image, whereas the remove tool is going to generate brand new pixels using artificial intelligence. So let me go ahead and undo that last move. And in this case, I'm going to make sure I use this layer, and I'm going to go ahead. In this case, I'm going to make sure I'm using the remove tool. Now remember, every time you pick a tool from the toolbar, there will be a set of tool options up here at the top. One of the ones here that I'm most interested in is the remove after each stroke. Now by default, that is usually checked, which means that every time I do a stroke and let go, it's going to calculate that change, and it won't allow me to keep making more selections or add more paint or painting more selection to remove more area. So, but if I undo that check mark, I can actually paint over the area, and if I let go of the mouse, it's not going to calculate until I either hit that check mark or hit enter on my keyboard. So let me go ahead. I'm going to just paint this whole thing down here in one stroke. Let me come down to the bottom, and I'm going to include the whole side here just because I think it'll do a better job. And then, so like I said, once that's done, and you always want to go slightly past the object, I'm going to hit the check mark or enter on my keyboard. It will go to work. It looks like I missed a little area down here, so I can actually go back and take that out additionally. So let me just hit that, and we'll hit enter. So the thing you will look for, again, here is that there might be areas that look similar, but at least they will kind of make sense in that fact that it's not obligated to using the pixels from your image. So you could probably get away with just using the healing brush on this. This is a very busy background. I'm going to go ahead and move on to remove the wire here. Now, one of the techniques I like to use when I'm doing this wire, kind of a selection like this, and or telephone wires or things that are very long and continuous through the image, is what I call the shift click method. And that is, I got the tool about the size that I want. I'm going to click once on the end here. Now remember, because I have that unchecked, it's not going to do anything until I tell it to. And so first check, or first click, and then I'm going to come out here a distance where I know I can draw a straight line. If I hold down shift and click again, it's going to connect my first dot to wherever my tool sits. And I can keep doing that. I'm going to go ahead and come to here, hold down shift, click again. I'm going to go ahead and pan over. I'm going to go ahead and go all the way over to his hip here. Remember, just do it in little sections, because that in some places that line that might bow or dip down, it might not be a perfectly straight line. But this actually gives you a chance to make that selection using shift click, where you can actually draw a nice good straight line, where that's very hard to draw even with mouse or even with your pen. We're going to go ahead and hit the check mark, tell it to go ahead and calculate that information, fill it in using artificial intelligence. And again, we shouldn't see any repeats or any kind of big areas where it would become noticeable. You can go back over an area again and say, oh, it didn't do a very good job here, so maybe I want to go ahead and do that again. Go ahead and hit enter. So knowing that you can, it doesn't have to all necessarily work properly all just in one fell swoop. But I'm going to do this side over here also. I'm going to make it a little bigger. I'll make a selection here, hold down the shift, click again. There's my straight line selection. Over here it bows quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this in sections. Hold down shift, click, hold down shift, click, hold down shift, click. Go ahead and hit enter on my keyboard. It's going to take a second to calculate that information. Again, I'm doing all of this on this secondary layer here where I made that change. And there's our changes. Again, this is a fairly simple thing because it's in a really complex area where it would be hard to find exact information. But anyhow, shift click. Remember that one. That's a good little tip for you there. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to rename this layer, or add to the rename. I'm going to also call this retouch. But I'm going to leave that other information in there so that I know that on this retouch layer, I have actually already done some noise removal, also some sharpening. Now, the first thing we're going to do is, let's go ahead, we're going to remove this Hollywood sign up here. And we're going to use the Generative Fill to do that. And the way the Generative Fill works is, it just requires you to make a selection. I'm going to use the lasso tool here. And I'm going to go ahead and just lasso the area around the Hollywood sign. You want to make sure you stay fairly close, and you want to make sure that you go just outside of the area that you want to fill. Now up here on this D, I'm a little bit close there, so I'm gonna go ahead and just add a little bit more to that upper corner. All right, so once we've selected that information, what's going to happen is your contextual taskbar is going to load up with a function here, Generative Fill. Now, one thing is usually this contextual taskbar will float and it will end up right below your selection, which I find really annoying. So I have parked it up here. And under the three dots here, you can check the mark here, check it, pin taskbar. And that means that the bar will stay pinned up there no matter where I make my selection. If your contextual taskbar isn't open or you want it to stay open, just go up to Window down at the very bottom here and tell it that you want the contextual taskbar to be open, and then pin it where you want it to go. All right, so we've already made the selection. I'm going to hit Generative Fill. There it's moving on me, right? So I don't know why it didn't stay. I'm going to go ahead and tell it. Maybe I unchecked it accidentally. I did. So there. Now we'll pin it. All right. So now it's pinned up there. It's been selected. Once I hit Generative Fill, I have an option to put in a prompt. Tell it what I want it to do. You generally don't have to tell it to remove something. It will go ahead and do that. And so we don't have to say remove. I'm just going to go ahead and hit Generate. It will go to town while it's working. Because they know we get bored easily, they go ahead and they put in this little tip here. To remove content, try generating without a prompt, and we'll fill the selection based on the surroundings. So that's exactly, but you get a different tip every time you use the tool. But yeah, kind of cool to watch those. All right, so there it is. And again, I don't know why this is still wanting to jump around. I've asked you to pin it. A weird little anomaly here. All right, we'll see what happens. Every time you use Generative Fill, if you have your Properties panel open, you will get three options up here to choose from. So that's option 1, there's option 2, there's option 3. And in this case, all three of them look pretty good. I don't know. And if you decide that you don't like any one of those three, you can just up here in the Properties panel, just come up here and hit Generate again, and it will generate three more options for you. So we'll give it a second. Didn't find what you were looking for? Generate again to get new variations. It must be listening to me because it picked up on every tip that I've already mentioned, but there it is. So generate again. We'll get three new options. We can go through those. That generated a weird little pattern back there that I don't really like. That's pretty good. And if you watch the tree over here on the right hand side, and each one of them, the tree sort of really changes shape. The top of the mountain or the hillside there changes shape. The area that meets the sky up there, because it was part of our selection, also changes shape. I'm going to say I like that. Don't like that one. So the other thing you can do with the don't likes is you can hit the little trash can here and you can tell it like, nope, take that away, don't want it. If you like this option and you want to sort of participate in helping AI learn a little better, you can go down and say, good, I like this one. And so you can fill out this rate your result if you want to. You've been up spending a bunch of time going through these. I usually don't do them. I just tell that, okay, I like this one, I'm going to use this one. Eventually, we're going to want to get rid of these extra choices here because they do add more pixel information to your file, and your file does get larger and larger. But you'll see down here in the layer panel that it creates a brand new layer with that information on it. It doesn't automatically do it to your, in this case, my retouch layer back here. It's a brand new layer. All of the options that I've created are always there. If I were to save this file and reopen it, all these options would still be there. I'm going to show you what I end up doing once I get all of my retouching or my generative fill stuff in order. If we zoom in, and this is exactly what you should do every time you use any kind of a tool, create a mask or anything, you want to make sure that the information that has been replaced, that it, in this case, the resolution should match the area where we replace the new pixels to the old pixels. And it looks pretty good. And the reason why it looks good is because the area that we have filled fits within those constraints of what Generative Fill can do. And it can match the resolution as long as the area that you're filling isn't bigger than 1024 by 1024 pixels. All right, 1024 by 1024. And there's a great tool inside Photoshop that we can use to measure those areas. If I grab the rectangular marquee tool up here, go up to my tool options, under style, fixed size, it usually will default to normal. Under my fixed size here, I can set a 1024 by 1024 pixels. Now if I click and hold down the mouse, I can drag this 1024 by 1024 selection around, and I can definitely see that the area where I removed the sign from fits within that area. All right. So our next step is I actually want to remove this guy. We're going to go ahead and take the park ranger out, and we're going to remove him. And again, I don't know why this thing keeps floating. It doesn't want to. And this is right now. This is why it's annoying. Every time you make a selection, this thing pops down there. I definitely want this thing to stay pinned. Pin the taskbar. Okay, it says it is. So we'll see. As soon as I make a selection, it shouldn't jump. All right, so I'm going to use my 1024 by 1024, and I'm going to see if I'm going to be able to do this man all in one fill. And if I use my selection here, you can see I can really only do about a third of him. His upper torso fits within that information. So I can tell you that in order to get the resolution to match, I'm going to have to do him in 2 or 3 sections. And so here's what I do. I always have my rulers open. And again, you can go up under View and go to Rulers, Show Rulers. And the reason why I have the rulers open is because the rulers will allow you to drag out these guides. And I want to set a guide on the border of that 1024 selection right there. All right, so I'm going to undo that selection, Control or Command D. I'm going to use, again, rectangular marquee tool set to the regular 1024. Click and hold. I can drag this around. I want to line that up to the guide that I pulled out. And indeed, you can see that 1024 is not going to get me all the way to the bottom of his feet. So I'm going to go ahead and drag out another guide and set it at the bottom of that 1024 selection. Control or Command D to get rid of my selection. And I already know that this is much smaller than the 1024. So I'm going to have to do this in 3 sections. Now I'm going to show you there's a problem with trying to do, in this case, I want to take this person out of the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the lasso tool, and I am going to select him entirely. And again, I'm going to do a couple of different ways of selection so you can kind of see ways of doing this, maybe a little easier than dragging the lasso tool around. Oops, I missed that spot on his leg, so I'll come down and add that in. Make sure that I get all of his pants. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do a generative fill. And generally, I'm just going to go ahead and hit generative fill. I'm not going to use a prompt here either. It will know to remove him. And I'm going to remove him from the scene. And then we'll zoom out and see how good it looks. Again, we'll end up with 3 options. Let it finish. Let me zoom out. Amazing, right? So there's option 1, there's option 2, there's option 3. So option 2 already gave away a little secret that I'm going to show you, is that artificial intelligence is so smart that it realizes there's a shadow here from his leg that's outside of the area that I just filled. And it knows to put in an object here to make sense of that shadow. And if you look at the lighting, it automatically recognizes the lighting's coming from the right. So this little sand mound or whatever it created is brighter on the right-hand side. It's casting a shadow to the left. So that's one thing that we need to be aware of as we do this. There are some options here that doesn't include the little sand mound. But again, remember, let's just go ahead and zoom back in and look at the area that we just filled all in one bite. And I'll go ahead and start from up here. If you look at the water area, and I can reload that selection so you can kind of see if I click on the mask. Everything inside the marching ants might be a little hard to see there, they're small, but everything in this area here, if you look at the detail in the water, it's not near as sharp as the information out there. If I look at this information on the little hillside here, there's a lot more detail. Let me go back in one more step here. There's a lot more detail here on outside of the selection than there is inside of the selection. And this would be horrible if you didn't zoom in and you went ahead and sent the file out and got a 30 by 40 inch print made, and it cost you $300 to get your print made, and it comes back and here's this big selection in the middle where the resolution doesn't match the rest of the image. Same thing down here in the brush. Here's the area that we filled. Here's the area on the outside of the fill, much sharper on the outside. So that's the first limitation, or one of the limitations we have, is it can only fill 1024 by 1024 to match that resolution. Get rid of the selection. I'm going to go ahead and label this one. We'll just call it large selection. And we'll keep it just so we have a comparison. But we're going to turn it off. All right, so we're back to looking at our guy. Now, here is another problem. I'm going to come back to my retouch layer. I'm going to select just this upper portion area here. Again, I'll just use the lasso tool for now. I will show you another way to make another selection. So I'm within my 1024 selection area. And here I've selected the upper torso. I'm going to go ahead and say Generative Fill. I'm not going to put in a prompt, and just say Generate. And it goes to work. Here's our tip. You can write a prompt in more than 100 different languages. So if you speak other languages, you could actually write your prompt in different languages. I'm going to stick with English if I write a prompt for me. But look what happens. It doesn't take away his upper torso. It replaces it with another one. And not only that, but 3 options. 3 different jackets, different hats. Pretty cool though. But that's not what we want. And the reason why it's doing that is because the information that's down here, it's looking at the entire image and says, oh, okay, we want to replace this upper torso. We're going to replace it with something that makes sense to the rest of the image, which means it just gives you a new upper torso, but pretty amazing on each one of them, right? So that's our generative fill if we aren't doing it correctly. And this was an image that, in preparing a demo for, where I had to then figure out, all right, so it's doing that because it's seeing all of the pixels in the image, which includes his lower torso and his legs. So here's the solution to get around that problem. If I go up to the contextual taskbar, there's a select subject, which is a much easier way for me to select the subject rather than drawing around the entire subject with the lasso. Now, if we look at this select subject, it's right on the edge of him. What I want to do is I'm going to eliminate his pixels from his entire body here. And the way I want to do that is to make sure that it selects all of those pixels. Up in the contextual taskbar, if I hit this one little icon here, I have selections or commands in here that I can do. I want to expand the selection, and I'm going to expand it by about 25 pixels, and I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice now that the selection is pushed out further than the edge, but there's still a little hole here between his arm. I want to make sure that that gets added to the selection. So that's now open to be included in the removal. This area between his legs, just because I think it's going to make more sense rather than trying to fill in that space with, or to include or exclude. I'm just going to remove all of these pixels here and zoom back out. So I want to remove these pixels from this retouch layer. So I'm going to go ahead and go up under Edit. I'm going to go to Cut, Shortcut, Controller Command X, and it's going to cut out his pixels. But it doesn't look like it. What happened? Well, because I have the background layer turned on. All right, so now we have the empty pixels in the area where his body used to be. And now if I make that same selection of his upper torso here, and again, I'll show you a couple of different ways of doing this. Good enough. It doesn't even have to be perfectly straight. All right, now I'm going to take that upper torso area. And again, remember, I can always use the minus lasso if I want this to be a little closer. So I'm trying to fill less of an area I can come in and kind of finesse the selection here. If I want to add to it, I can add to it and come right to the bottom of that line there. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and say generate. Again, won't use a command or a prompt. I'll just let it go. It's going to generate a whole new layer. You can move a generative layer and regenerate in a new position. There's a tip. So when it gets done, hopefully this time, there's no body, right? Because now it doesn't even know that there's a body there. And if we look at our 3 selections, there's our 3 selections. Again, I'm kind of looking at just the water, the tops of the weeds, and this information on the other side of the cove. I kind of like that. It's got some of the green in the middle here, so we'll take that. We'll take that. Before I show you the resolution, or let's actually go ahead. We'll zoom in and look at the resolution. We'll say, because we have this information back here on the cliff that we could look at. And now, if you look at this information across the bay here, where the greenery is, the rocks and all that, if I turn back on the one large selection, you'll see the difference between that resolution and the resolution that we just generated. Much more detail in here now. Same thing down on the brush and everything below there. So let's go ahead and continue here. I'm gonna so I'll show you another way of making a selection here. So I'm gonna go to the magic wand and I'm gonna click. I want to make sure that I'm back on my retouch layer. I want to select the empty pixels. So when I do that, remember, the empty pixels goes all the way up here on this layer. Now what I'm going to do is I want to eliminate these areas above and below that center section. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll use the marquee tool to get rid of them. Now I'm going to get rid of this fixed size here. I'm just going to go ahead and go to a regular normal. And I'm going to say I want to get rid of this upper area here. Now I want to make sure that I don't come all the way down to that guide there. I want to come just above it, so that I don't end up with an empty spot there. So now I've removed those pixels from the selection. Got to make sure you're on the minus tool. I want to take away the selection from down here. And actually, I'm going to come just above the line here. So since I'm above the line there, to stay within that 1024. And there's that. Now there's my only selection. I'm going to make sure I go to the, and this can be important, is this layer order. I want to make sure that after I've done the selection, I'm going to go back to this upper layer here where I've already filled that selection, and I want the next one to be above that particular layer there, and I'll talk about that in a minute why. So let's go ahead and say generative fill and generate. The reason why is because this information is looking at the other surrounding information to be able to make this edge make sense. And so I want each successive layer to be above the previous one before that. Otherwise, sometimes you end up with a hard edge line there, which isn't a big deal. You could fix that too. All right, so there's our 3 options. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Kind of like that one. It looks like these bushes go up all the way. And then we're going to go ahead and make the final selection. In this case, I think I can probably just use the lasso tool. So I'm going to go ahead and come around here. Now remember, last time we ended up seeing that weird little object created because of the shadow. I'm going to go ahead and just generate again just to kind of see what it does this time. I had one time it actually made a cat for some reason. So here's my generative fill. I want to make sure, again, I'm going to the uppermost layer, say generate, and more than likely it's going to generate an object down there at the bottom because it sees that shadow. And this is, like, to me, was just incredible that it actually can figure that information out. Some kind of little, I don't know what that is. A fur bunny. There's another blob of something. Anyhow, you notice it wants to create something there to make the shadow make sense. Now, I can always I can retouch over an area that already is generative filled. So I can then, let's just say we want to get rid of some of the shadow here, and I also want to get rid of this object. I let go of the mouse. I want to get rid of this object here. Now if I do generative fill, again, it's going to be above that layer. Now, one of the things you have to remember when you're doing these fills in sections, you can't go back and change one of the options of the previous generative fills, because each one of these are generated based on the information that was there when you generated it. And I'll show you when it gets through with this one what I'm saying. All right, so there the object is gone. If I decide to go back to, say, this one here, where I remove the feet from it. So one is, you can see here's the layer that's sitting above it, right? Let me go down to, let me do this middle one. So if I go back to this middle generative fill and I change one to one of the variations, you'll see then that it doesn't make much sense, because it's looking at, like, all of a sudden here's these weeds coming out of the middle of nowhere, because the information that it actually built the selection on, in this case, was a different selection. I think it was this one here we did, because it actually made these branches that go up on top. So just know that before you move on to the next section below, you kind of have to commit to which version you want to use, which generated version you want to have in place there, right? Otherwise, if you start switching them, they won't make any sense. If we now, so now I've got I really don't need my guides there anymore. So I've created a shortcut, but if I go under view, I can go to the guides and I want to say clear guides, but I've created a shortcut here, Control G. I did that so that, because I use the guides a lot, and it's just quicker for me to hit Control G and it goes away. So there's the image as we started. Here are in this case, 4 generated layers that we ended up replacing the man and also the shadow. And again, if we look at the previous version, where here is the entire selection done at one time, and then here's the selection done after we did it in sections. And you can see that resolution is so much better than it was when we looked at it in one selection. All right, so that is the generative fill, and then also using the removal tool. And remember, we can always go back. There is one more thing I want to do. So before I move on, I actually want to take these 4 generative fill layers and I want to merge these 4 fill layers together. So I'm going to just do a shift there and connect to all 4 of these generative fill layers. I'm going to right click and I'm going to ask it to merge those layers. So now all the generative fill information is all on one layer. And the reason why I've done that is I like to double check and make sure that information truly is as sharp as the other information out there. Because at this point, I can take all of this generative fill information, I'll go back into filter and sharpen, and I will use unsharp mask. Now remember, this is only going to sharpen the generative fill stuff, because that's all sitting on one layer. If I turn this off and on, it actually is improved a little bit. And that's the same amount here. I might drop this down just a bit because it seems a little sharper, and say okay. So now all of my generative fill information has also added a little sharpening to it. It all fits in there really well, and my goal now is to go ahead and merge my generative fill information down to my retouch layer, and now all of my retouch, removing all of my retouch information is all on the same layer, removing the wire, removing the man, removing the Hollywood sign. All of that information came off of the same thing. And actually, here's I forgot, my Hollywood sign up here is still separate, right? So if I want to, or I should also, is remove, take that and merge it down too. And now all of it is all on one layer. So my Hollywood sign is now gone. It's all on this one single layer here. This was our layer that we did in one move. I'm gonna go ahead and throw that out. And at this point, I would be ready to move on and continue processing this image just as I would a normal image. I can go on and use all the regular Photoshop tools at this point. All right, next we'll take a look at some of the other functions. All right, I have another image open here in Photoshop. This is a photograph done on one of my workshops up in Pismo Beach at a place called Los Osos Oaks, where they have these beautiful oak trees and moss hanging from the trees. And in this case, got a nice backlit tree. I wanted to mention that that same resolution problem that we had previously in the other image, trying to replace or repair areas. We also have the same problem if we're going to use the Generative Expand, where we want to make the canvas larger. So in this case, what I want to do is I'm going to add to the right-hand side of the image, and also we'll make a comparison to how well Generative Expand works compared to Content-Aware Fill. So you'll see over in the layers here that I've already unlocked the background layer, which is going to give me transparent pixels when I use the crop tool. I've also duplicated the layer and done my noise removal and sharpening just like I did in the previous image, which is part of my general workflow, especially using any of the AI tools. All right, so I'm going to begin by grabbing the crop tool here. And remember, in the tool options bar up here, we've got 3 options here where I can just crop to show transparent pixels, I can crop to use Generative Expand, and I can crop to use Content-Aware Fill. Okay, I'm going to sort of back out of here a little bit so I have some room to add to the one side of the image. So let me zoom out. Okay, so I got the crop tool. I'm going to just click. It's going to fill the space of my crop. I'm going to grab the right-hand side, and I'm going to start to pull out. And we'll go, let's say, this is a full-size image too, by the way. So again, a full-size pixel image. I'll go to about 22.5 inches there. So I've added on about 3 inches or so. I'm going to use, to start with, I'm going to use the Content-Aware Fill option here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter. And I don't know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But generally with pretty complex things, it really doesn't do a great job. And so here are the results. If I zoom in on that, you will see that we've got several, this little tree or a little brush part here has repeated several times on the end here. That would be very noticeable. The branches are all kind of confused here. They don't really quite know where they belong. So anyhow, there's Content-Aware Fill, not very good. So we can kind of pretty much think about Content-Aware Fill has been replaced by these AI functions. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. This time I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to switch to the Generative Expand function, and I'm going to still use the crop tool. Now we could do this also by expanding the canvas and then filling the space. Doesn't matter. Either way we end up with pretty much the same function. So in this case I've got the crop tool. I'm going to go ahead and expand it out again about to that 22.5 inches, somewhere in there. And I'm going to fill the space now using Generative Expand. I'll just say generate and let it go to town. Now again, I'm going to get 3 options here that I can choose from. So that's going to give me the ability to possibly end up with a better selection or a better adjustment than what Content-Aware did. Pretty much guaranteed. Again, so now you can see the branches on the right-hand side all seem to make pretty good sense. We don't have a bunch of repeated patterns in here of that information. But now remember, this is a full-size image. So if I zoom in to that area, let's go ahead and take it up to, we're at 67.7, nearly 100%. And if I compare our resolution again, so let me just show you, I'll make a selection of that mask. So right at this edge here, I'll drag out a guide. Here is about where our transition happens. And if we go ahead and turn, or not even turn off, but if we look at the resolution of these leaves in here and the tree branches, they don't match this information over here. And again, that's because if I go ahead and grab my marquee tool set to the 1024 fixed size and I click, here's my 1024 size, right? So just one section here, I'm at 1024 on the width, but well beyond probably 4 times or 5 times the size here. So if I zoom in on that, you'll see our pixel dimensions that we could safely add to is quite a bit smaller than this whole side over here. So again, Generative Expand does not do that great job in the sense that we're not going to end up with a really good resolution. All right, so let me deselect that for a second. So we know that it fits within this area here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the layer here. I've got the empty pixels indicated. I'm going to go ahead and use my marquee tool again for the 1024. And I know here's my first section here. I'm going to go ahead and just say Generative Fill. And I'm going to hit Generate. And this time it'll be in that 1024 section. Hopefully the resolution will be better. And I will have to do just like I did on our previous image where we replaced the man. This time we're going to be filling this section one at a time. Now remember, I need to look at this information and decide which one I need to use. This is kind of interesting is in that it has continued on with this branch, but it left, again, we didn't have this part of the selection. So I'm going to choose that one just out of curiosity and say, okay, let's go ahead and continue from here. So here's our second 1024 selection. I want it to slightly overlap the previous one. I'm going to go ahead and say Generative Fill and Generate. It's going to give me my next one. And I will just work my way down that right-hand side and see how many it takes to fill the space in 1024 chunks. So there, you can see it actually filled in that little space there. Let's see, probably every one of them did. That's pretty good. It added some more branches into here. That's kind of weird where it connects to the, actually it goes behind the tree branch. That would be okay. And here's another one. I kind of like that one too. But I think I like the first one where it doesn't have quite as much information there. All right, so I will probably go ahead and make these additional selections. And I may speed up the recording so we don't have to sit through each one of those and watch them go. So I'm going to hit Generate again. Okay, and there's our results from the next one. That looks pretty good. Yeah, I kind of like this one where it ends at the right height. Let's go ahead and make our last final selection here. And remember, if I want to, I can also switch back to the normal and use the minus and take away this top area here if I want to just do that corner. Generative Fill and Generate. All right, there it is, and our selections, I like that. I like that. It kind of, this one in the corner kind of fits this same idea there. So there's our whole section there filled in. Let me go ahead and clear my guide there. And again, we've got it 1, 2, 3, 4 selections that we had to do to fill that whole space there. But we now have proper matching resolution. I'm going to do the same thing we did last time too. I'm going to go ahead and select those 4 generative fill layers. I am going to merge those layers together. I will go into the filter. I will go to sharpen, unsharp mask, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Let's go one more. So this will be at 50%. Now the interesting thing is that at 50%, we're looking at this information here. Inside of our unsharp mask panel, if I click anywhere, I can actually see the resolution. So there's the edge of that branch there, right? So I think this is way over sharpened when you look at information over here. So I'm going to go ahead and back this down. We're going to say to maybe half a pixel, 0.5, and let me drop this down a little lower. And if you look at these pieces over here, they look pretty close to the sharpness over here. So we've improved the sharpness. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And as usual, let me put this thing down here. Before I merge it down, I will compare our original one, which is like not nearly as detailed. That was the one that we did the entire side at one time. And here's the one where we actually did them in sections and ended up with sharpening also. So to move on, I would go ahead and merge that one down. Throw this one out just as an example. Zoom back out, and now we have the image with the additional side on there where the resolution looks great. And we would take the image and move on from here and process it as we normally would. So that's Generative Expand, using it in sections. We want to make a canvas wider or taller, either way. Done in 1024 sections, 1024 by 1024 sections. All right. All right, we're going to take a look at this oak tree image, also taken at the Los Osos Oaks on one of my workshops up in Pismo. And this time we're going to work on a technique where we want to turn our photographs into an oil painting, a watercolor, some other medium. We can pick anything, pastel. There's a bunch of mediums we can choose from. And there's a special technique that is necessary in order to make this work. Because if we simply select the layer, and we'll use a controller command A to select the entire image, and at this point we'll go up to Generative Fill, and if we type in oil painting and hit generate, it will go to work using that prompt. There's our image. Obviously, like it does every time, we're going to get a new generative fill layer above the background layer. And using the prompt oil painting, we are going to literally get an oil painting. Doesn't look anything like our original image at all. Can't see the tree in this at all. There's 3 variations on what looks like an oil painting. Anyhow, not the effect that we want. Now, there's a bunch of ways to achieve this effect, and I'm going to show you one to start with, and then I will show you a quick little way of doing this with a free panel that you can get online. All right, so we're going to start again with the background layer. We are going to need to go into the channels panel here and just create a new channel. And you'll see here alpha channel, it's black. What we want to do is we want to change the black alpha channel. So if we click on the foreground color here, we're going to pick a percentage. So by default we may be at 0. If you go to the B panel here for brightness, and we will type in this case, let's go with 30%. So we get a much lighter gray value. I'm going to say OK. And then I need to take that foreground color and fill the alpha channel with that. So if I select the alpha channel and I use Alt or Option backspace, I will now fill the alpha channel with that 30%. Now, it's a good idea maybe to go ahead and take this alpha channel and rename it at this point so we can kind of keep track of it. So I'll just say alpha channel 30. I need to load the alpha channel value, so I'm going to hit controller command and click on the thumbnail. I'll get this warning if I'm below 50%, but doesn't matter. We're just going to click OK. I'm going to go back to the RGB channel here. I now have that alpha channel loaded in, and now I'll go to Generative Fill, and I'll use the same oil painting prompt and hit generate, and we'll see what happens this time. And now you'll see we get 3 results that are much closer to the original image, or at least using the details of my original image. Okay, so you can play with different values in the alpha channel and load them just simply by again opening up this color picker, playing with the brightness and dropping it down to 30 to 10 to 12. You can pick any number you want, and you'll get different results each time. Now I'm going to show you a much simpler way of doing this. I'm going to go ahead and throw that one out. So that's the using the alpha channel way. I'm also going to throw away the alpha channel. Don't need that. And right here I have a panel called TK Gen Fill. The TK is Tony Kuiper. He does a lot with luminosity masking and a bunch of other panels that I've used over the years. This TK Gen Fill panel is free. You go to his website and you can download this panel. So if you just went to Google and typed in Tony Kuiper Gen Fill panel, it should come up. I'll put the website address here in a sec on the screen for you. So this works so much simpler in the sense that you'll see I've already loaded in the oil painting prompt here, but basically you just typed in the prompt here. There's oil painting, and now all I have to do is select the value. So he has between 15, so in 5% increments. I can go, in this case, let me just load in, we'll say 20. So I load in 20, you get this sort of magenta color over the image. You'll see if I put in 95, it shows a stronger 60. So it at least gives you some kind of hint of where you're at. So we're on a very subtle value here. And then all I have to do is hit generate. It goes to work and thinks about it. It's basically doing the same thing in the background, just a much simpler way of doing this effect. There's other things that the panel does, but I won't play around with all of them up in here. But look at that. There's our results from the panel, and there's the 3 that we do here. And I can always just hit generate again. If I want to, I've already forgotten what number we use, but you can type in the number here, which will help you keep track of what you've done. If I want to repeat the same results, I want to turn that layer off, and let's take it up to 40%. I'll leave the same prompt in there and then just hit generate. Pretty simple. You only have to do 2 things here. The other way, you have to create the alpha channel. You have to fill the alpha channel with a different percentage and then type in your prompt. And the panel is free, so why not just use the panel to do what you need to do. So you can see as we get higher up in value, closer to 100%, if I go back to 100% and say generate, I'm going to get exactly those same results that we started with, where it's just blobs of oil paint over the top of your image. You're not going to see the content of your image. I generally find, there it is. So that's basically the 100% level. If we are going to do this, again at a much lower level, and I usually will start down at the bottom and work my way up, because I can tell you that those are generally going to be your best results by using those values. I'm going to want to turn these off, so I'm looking at the image again. Hit oil painting at 15%, generate. I think it's a good idea to label your layers here so that you can kind of keep track of what each one of those layers, what percentages you used. And you can see at 15%, it's pretty subtle. That's actually not too bad. Not too bad. So you can see anyhow, the lower percentages work a lot better. So that's the Tony Kuiper panel. We can also, using the same thing, I'll say let's do 15%, and I will turn this into a pastel drawing. And generate. There's one other little section here that I will show you because it's kind of interesting. Let that finish. So this is the results of using pastel drawing at the 15%. Not bad. I might actually need maybe a stronger variation on that. So I'll use pastel drawing, and let's go up to 35% and generate. So again, you can see how quick and easy this is to kind of keep going and going and going. So much more user-friendly than going through the whole channel process. And it's free. All right, so that's a little stronger pastel look. Wow, that's really... Anyhow, you get the idea. So you can have fun and play with that. The other thing that we can do is... let me go ahead and clear this. If I want to, if you hit the inspiration button, what it will do is it will open up this panel here where Tony has put in all of these sort of styles. So you'll see movements, themes, techniques, effects, materials, concepts, color and tone, lighting, and composition. And so this can be used if you're going to generate an image from scratch, or if you want to just use this to try to affect the way that your, in this case, artistic renderings are going to look. But you'll notice it automatically brings over the pastel drawing prompt that I already had. I can still change it from here. The ones that are marked in the sort of orange gold color is because I have, if you click on the word, it will select it. If you right clicked on it, it'll mark it, so it makes it easier for you to find. If you right click on it again, then that goes away. So you'll see if let's do this. I'm going to get rid of the pastel drawing. All right, so let's start up here at the top where it says content type. And I think I'm going to go ahead and check art up here. And then let's go through the list and see what we can create from that original photograph of the old oak tree. So I'm going to kind of come through here. I think I'll check fantasy. Down under themes. Here's a weird one. Glass morphism. Let's see what that does. Moving down, techniques. I'm going to go with bold lines. Interesting. Effects. Color explosion. I'm trying to do enough kind of weird things to see where this goes. This maybe not so weird. Let's see. Concepts. We'll just go with beautiful. Kind of weird. And color tone, we'll kind of leave it the way that it is. And then we'll go with lighting. Let's go with dramatic lighting. And maybe just leave the composition the way that it was. So you'll see up here at the top now, we have everything that we've checked, art and all the other words. It's created all that. That's actually when I say, okay, that's going to take us back into Photoshop. And that all now becomes part of the prompt down here. And so we will choose some variations and figure out, we'll start with 30%. And maybe what I'll do is I'll go through and do a few of these, but I'll speed up the video and just kind of show you the results. All right. Okay, so this bottom one, our first one, I did at 30%. That's pretty wild. Let me zoom that up just a bit. Go ahead and turn that off there. So that's at the 30%. Weird, huh? So there's some metallic and what was all of our fantasy, glass morphism, bold lines, color explosion, made of metal, beautiful, and dramatic light. So here's our three variations. 1, wild. 2, interesting. 3. So that's at the 30%. And then I changed it to 25%. Here's our number 1. Oops, not changing. I gotta hang on. Let me go back. Gotta select the layer. There's number 1. Wow, it really distorted the tree. There's number 2, some weird colors in there. And there's number 3, interesting. And then I dropped it down to 20%. And there's number 1. So you can see that it's getting closer back to the photo, the photo look rather than the art look. That's still pretty dramatic change there. That's number 2, and there's number 3. Anyhow, so you can see this Tony Kuiper panel offers a lot of possibilities to play with. So I'd encourage everybody, if you've got the panel, play with it. If you don't have the panel, why not jump online, get it. It's free. Tony Kuiper's website. There's instructions there on how to download it and how to install it into Photoshop, and it will be there for you to use. I'll be anxious to see what some of you end up creating. All right, I'm going to take a minute and kind of run through a little bit of using Firefly. Now, I could spend the whole day going through all the Firefly functions inside the Firefly app. But just know, with your Adobe subscription, you have access to Firefly as a standalone app. And you can also access Firefly directly from inside Photoshop. But you need to be aware of currently, the Firefly app is up to a version 3, so they've made improvements to it 3 times, and the function from inside Photoshop is not quite up to date. Now with the beta version, as soon as that becomes part of the regular version of Photoshop, Firefly is going to be even more readily available directly from inside Photoshop, and you will have access to the most current version. But I'm going to show you how to access it here and actually show you the differences. All right, so I'm going to start by opening up a new file, and I'm going to use a 1024 by 1024 pixel at 300 ppi because that's kind of the resolution limitations that I have. Go ahead and just create it with a transparent background. We can use the sRGB color space. We'll just use this default setting. All right, so I'm going to, looking at this square here. It's 1024 pixels. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Control A to select the entire square. I'm going to now go to Generative Fill, and I'm going to type in a prompt. And let's just go with Old Barn. Let's see, Old Barn, blue sky. Let's just go with that. See what we come up with. Old Barn, blue sky. Generate. All right, so it's going to access Firefly to fill this entire space with the words that I used in that prompt. So there we go. There's an old barn. Now, one thing I could have done that might have improved this is I start telling it, giving it some more prompts that are more photo related, right? So these are all fairly kind of close up. That one's not too bad. So if I want to alter this, I can go old barn, blue sky, and let's add to this. I will say wide angle lens. Spell that correctly would be good. Wide angle lens, landscape style. And let's generate that and see if that changes it. Now the wide angle should give us a barn, where we're going to see the whole barn. Sometimes it's due to it can be a completely distorted barn. So this is not, again, we're looking at this old version here. The wide angle lens did not help it, so I would remove that. But now I'm going to show you a little different way, again, of doing it in here. I'm going to go ahead and select my old barn blue sky prompt, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go ahead and turn this layer off. I'm going to go to the Tony Kuiper panel, where I can actually put in that same prompt. So old barn blue sky, I will go to the inspiration link here, and now I can use some of these things to add to my prompt. So let's go with my themes. I'll go cinematic, hyper realistic maybe. So I have these things marked in gold. I'll go ahead and add misty. I don't want futuristic added there. Effects, I don't want grainy, iridescent, isometric. I don't think I want any of those. Color tone, muted color, pastel tone. I think I could go with warm, but I'm going to go with dramatic lighting, golden hour. That'll change my color tone. I'll leave surreal lighting off. We'll go to landscape photography, shot from below. Last time I used wide angle, it didn't work so well, but I'm going to go ahead and add that there. So now you'll see here's my new prompt. I'm going to go ahead and select that and copy it just so I have it on my clipboard. And let's go ahead and say okay and see what results we get from this. I think I'm going to need to make a selection of the whole thing, Control A, and I'm going to hit generate. And now from inside the Tony Kuiper panel, I'm still accessing Firefly, but I use that inspiration as a way of maybe generating some better prompts. Now this doesn't look so very photographic, which is okay because I definitely want to show you the differences here. So there we are, generated from Firefly inside Photoshop. Now I've copied that prompt, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Adobe Creative Cloud, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look in my apps, and I'm going to try to find my Firefly. And I don't know why I looked in here earlier and I don't see it listed here, but I can always go up here, search Creative Cloud, and I'll go ahead and type in Firefly. There it is there. And what it's going to do, Firefly is accessed through the internet. So there I am on the Creative Cloud. I can scroll down here, and here's all the generative functions that I have access to. Text to image is the one that we're looking for. I could just add my prompt in right here, and that would do it. So either way, I can start from here. So I'm just going to Control V. That'll get me all of my prompts I used before. I will say generate, and now this is where it actually opens up to the Adobe Firefly page where we can access all of the settings, and you'll see everything down here to the side. Here's my prompt down here. There's the generations, and you can see these look so much better than the one that I developed inside of Photoshop. But I'm going to go back and say, look, here I have access to all kinds of settings over here on the left side. And again, time notwithstanding, I don't have time to go through all of the settings. For some reason, this wide angle seems to, and again, it's going to kind of show too much, I think. What I'm going to do too is I'm going to change the aspect ratio from square to a landscape. I could go widescreen 16:9, so maybe I'll get a bigger area to fill it with. I'm going to leave photo checked here. Now down here in the composition and reference, I can actually use some preloaded images as a style to use it to create a composition from. I can also upload an image. So if I have an image style that I want it to look at a composition and say, I'd rather have it use that as my example, it'll show up here and it will use that for a composition reference. Then down in here, I have the option 2 of adding in reference images, where it'll reference a particular style or a particular image or particular color values. I'm not going to go through that yet right now. Down here in effects, there's a whole bunch of these popular movements, themes, techniques, and you'll notice that a lot of these are the ones that Tony Kuiper had in his panel. Didn't use all of them, but he had some of them listed in there. So I can use those to add to it. So themes here, 3D, anime, cartoon, flat design, none of those. I want something very photographic. So I'm still looking for anything that might help me create a better photograph. I think that I'm not going to use any of those. Let's see what it says under popular. So bokeh, layered, synthware, digital art, hyper-realistic. I think I'll just go without it. Color and tones, lighting, these are the same ones that I had inside of Kuiper's backlighting, dramatic lighting, golden hour I already have listed in there. And camera angle. In camera angle you have close-up, knolling, but knolling, what is knolling? I don't know. Maybe looking up it kind of looks like. Landscape, macro, photograph through a window, shallow depth of field, shot from above, shot from below, surface detail, and wide angle. I've already used wide angle. I really don't like the look of that. So I'm going to go ahead and just say, let's see what, I don't know what this knolling does. I'm going to remove the wide angle right there. And you'll see down here, it's listed down here now. So, all right, so I've got my settings. I don't want to go to these. Oh, so maybe it doesn't hyper-realistic join. Oh, so it's giving me some other suggestions. I don't want to. Okay, so I'm going to go. Suggestions should be turned off. All right, so there, Old Barn said that, and I've added this knolling to it, whatever that is. So, and I've also changed to a more panoramic view or cinematic. So let's see what it comes up with a new prompt. Once it's generated the image, there we go. So I ended up now with the barn a little further away, and that was only by going from the square to the other 16:9 ratio. There's a closer up view of the image itself. I can hit the download button and tell it that I want to download the image and save it into a particular location. I don't think I want to save the image. Do more with your image. There's things here where you can add text and all that. I'm not going to do any of that. You can scroll through so you can actually see on the bigger image each one of these images. So definitely, we could regenerate again. We could add to the prompt and just hit generate again, and it will generate 3 more. You will very seldom ever, if ever, see an exact repeat from if I said generate again. If I generate again, you're never probably going to see the exact same image. But in this case, you'll always get 4 new images, and you have the opportunity to save them. So that's using Firefly as a standalone app, which you can see generates a much more believable image as a photograph. I mean, it may not be perfect yet, but remember, we're still working on all this AI functions here. But that, compared to what we saw inside of the Photoshop version, this is using an earlier version of Firefly. Looks very almost cartoonish. So this is, which for me would not be usable if I was looking for something as a photograph. I would prefer to use Firefly directly. I lost my Firefly over here. I'd rather use Firefly directly from the app if you're going to use Firefly. Now there's a bunch of apps out there. I am currently using Mid-Journey as my mode of creating AI generated images. Here are a few examples of some images that I've been working on with AI, where I am combining AI generated images together with my own photographs in a process that I really like to kind of call more of a collaborative process working with AI. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about what other artists and people are doing with AI processing, I have a group that meets every month online. It's a meetup group, DPX AI. We meet on the last Thursday evening of every month from 7 till 9-ish. You know me, I can go on all night long. Anyhow, if you're interested, jump in and look at the meetup group and sign up, and you will get the announcements, and we'd love to see you at one of our meetings. All right, so I think that's going to wrap us up here. If I was actually here live, I could say, do we have any questions? And I could answer some questions. So I want to thank again Judy for inviting me to do this. I hope we've kind of covered everything that she expected. All right, so thanks a lot, everybody. And I want all of you women to stay in creative photography because we need more creative photographers like you guys. Thanks so much. And as always, stay creative, be inspired, and be an inspiration to others.